Chapter 23. The burden of Tyre. Howl, ye ships of Tarshish, for it is laid waste, so that there is no house, no entering in. From the land of Chittim it is revealed to them. Be still, ye inhabitants of the isle, though thou whom the merchants of Zidon that pass over the sea have replenished, and by great waters the seeds of Sihor. The harvest of the river is her revenue, and she is a mart of nations. Be thou ashamed, O Zidon, for the sea hath spoken, even the strength of the sea, saying, I travail not, nor bring forth children, neither do I nourish up young men, nor bring up virgins. As the report concerning Egypt, so shall they be sorely pained at the report of Tyre. Pass ye over to Tarshish, howl, you inhabitants of the isle. Is this your joyous city, whose antiquity is of ancient days? Her own feet shall carry her afar off to sojourn. Who hath taken this counsel against Tyre, the crowning city, whose merchants are princes, whose traffickers are the honorable of the earth? The Lord of hosts has proposed it, to stain the pride of all glory, and to bring into contempt all the honorable of the earth. Pass through thy land as a river, O daughter of Tarshish. There is no more strength. He stretched out his hand over the sea. He shook the kingdoms. The Lord hath given a commandment against the merchant city to destroy the strongholds thereof. And he said, Thou shalt no more rejoice, O thou oppressed virgin daughter of Zidon. Arise, pass over to Chittim. There also shalt thou have no rest. Behold, the land of the Chaldeans. This people was not, till the Assyrian founded it for them that dwell in the wilderness. They set up the towers thereof, they raised up the palaces thereof, and he brought it to ruin. Howl, ye ships of Tarshish, for your strength is laid waste. And it shall come to pass in that day that Tyre shall be forgotten 70 years, according to the days of one king. After the end of 70 years shall Tyre sing as an harlot. Take an harp, go about the city, thou harlot that hast been forgotten. Make sweet melody, sing many songs, that thou mayest be remembered. And it shall come to pass at the end of 70 years that the Lord will visit Tyre, and she shall turn to her hire, and shall commit fornication with all the kingdoms of the world upon the face of the earth. And her merchandise and her hire shall be holiness to the Lord. It shall not be treasured nor laid up, for her merchandise shall be for them that dwell before the Lord, to eat sufficiently and for durable clothing. In this chapter, Isaiah is talking largely about Tyre. Tyre. Now, Tyre was one of the city-states of Phoenicia, which was an area that's probably maybe 10 or 15 miles wide on the far eastern end, of the Mediterranean Sea. And Tyre itself is located probably less than 50 miles northwest of the Sea of Galilee. We're not talking about great distances here. It is Israel's northern neighbor. And Tyre and Sidon were both Phoenician cities, and Phoenicia was the trading power in the world. Babylon at this time was the most powerful land empire, and the trading empire was Phoenicia. And from this area, Phoenicia had colonies all over the entire Mediterranean, and every port there were Phoenicians, and the major ships going back and forth all across the Mediterranean were Phoenician ships from Tyre and ships from Sidon. Sidon was the biggest port. It had an inner and outer port. Tyre at this particular point in time was on an island, and it had ports and it had trade, but Sidon was probably the biggest trading partner. But Tyre was the new city. It was the more dominant city. And so it was the one that was basically centered out by the Lord and by Isaiah. If you want to have a look, you can see it talked about when we get to Ezekiel chapter 26 to 28, if I remember correctly. Now, it mentions Tarshish and Chittim. Tarshish was Spain, coastal Spain as we would know it. And Chittim was the island of Cyprus, which is just off the coast from where Sidon and Lebanon are today. And the Phoenicians were the center of world trade. I mean, they were the first world economy. And everything was based on trading for things that they produced and that they traded with others. These huge amounts of wealth there. The merchants were national heroes and treated like that. The Sidon was city-state, and it was the city. It was the older of the Phoenician city-states. Tyre was the newer one. Most of Sidon's wealth, Sidon was further north than Tyre, but most of Sidon's wealth came from trade in the Egyptian grain, Egyptian wheat harvest, barley harvest. And that's because it had a far bigger port. Now in those days they used to have ships that were powered by oars. And at one particular point, there's one document that talks about having 50 of these huge grain ships in the port of Sidon. And it was massive, massive trade. I think the port of Sidon was probably bigger than all of Tyre. Tyre was originally two parts. There was an island part, and then there was a part on the mainland. And they were connected when Alexander the Great conquered that area, and he built a causeway between the two. In verses 14 to 18, Tyre is set up, is told they're due for the judgments of God. And basically it says they commit fornication. And basically, with all the trade, their merchants and their people just assumed, just took on the culture and the worship and the habits of the people that they traded with. And since they traded with all kinds of morally corrupt groups, they took on all kinds of morally corrupt behavior. You can take a look in verses 15, 17, and 18 here for that, and in Revelations chapter 17, verses 1 and 2, and get a little bit more idea of how the Lord viewed this. Eventually in chapter 18, it does tell us that the wealth and the merchandise of the world that goes through Phoenicia, as not necessarily the ports of Tyre and Sidon, but through world trade, because this is the duality of Isaiah, but the wealth and the merchandise of world trade will be used to build up the kingdom of Jehovah, the kingdom of Jesus Christ on earth. And that's what that means. It's interesting to see how Isaiah, you can start to get a feel for the fact that Isaiah will use every negative thing as an example, every country or people or practice that can be condemned in its own way right now for the way it is in Isaiah's time, as a type and a symbol for the destruction of the world and the need for judgments against the world in the latter days. To him, both of them they are the same thing. He's seen it happening, and he knows that it will come about, and to him he talks about it as though they were both in existence at the same time. But for him they are. For us, there's the past and then there's the present, and it's an interesting challenge to try to separate them sometimes.